This is the FRC Roundtable, coming to you all the way from Minnesota. Your host team 2052 Nightcrawler presents this weekly FRC gathering where FIRST Robotics competition teams take cooperation off the field. Share your knowledge, give and get advice, solve a challenge, or celebrate what makes your team special. 3, 2, 1, go!
All right, I have started the recording. Welcome, everyone. If you didn't know, I suspect everyone knows, but tonight's call will be hosted by the world famous Ian Frankel, who I'm sure everyone will recognize from the review video, and we're going to be talking about kickoff. Ian made a great suggestion. It would be great if we could just hop in the video here and say who you are and what team you're from. And I'd also love to know if this is the first time you've joined our call, our Sunday night call. So if anyone wants to kick that out, I guess I should start. My name is Scott Davis. I'm a mentor for 2052. This is not my first call.
I'm Stacy Foreman. I'm finance mentor for 2472, and this is my first time, brand new mentor.
Yep, I'm Mohammed. I'm also a mentor of Team 2052. I've been a couple of calls in the past.
Mark Shapiro, Team 3926.
I'm Ian Frankel. I signed up to be hosting this roundtable tonight, and I'm also from Team 3926.
I'm John Stratus.
34 and 3275. Out of Cass Lake. Thanks.
John Stratus from 2177, Robots.
I'm Nicole Vaniel from Team 2052.
Aiden Stigara for 2472.
Tasha Olsanowski from 3277, first time.
Lauren Cook from Team 2846.
Tracy Cook from Team 2846.
I'm Paul O'Connell from Team 2502.
I'm Sean Cosa from Team 2472.
Kurt Tice, also from 2472.
Isaac, Team 2052.
I'm M from 2450.
I'm Kevin from Team 2052.
I'm on the Team Krithi from Team 2472.
David Westerberg from Team 4009.
Quentin from 2549.
My name's Lexi. I'm from Team 2052.
My name is Steve Pescalo, also 2022.
My name is Julie, and I am 2549.
I'm Sydney, also from 2549.
Any other folks want to introduce themselves? All right. I will say one more thing before I turn it over to Ian. It's always great if people want to help, especially when they're talking, keep their cameras on. It certainly helps the conversation, but only if you're comfortable doing so. Don't feel obligated if that makes you uncomfortable. And if you're new to the call, hopefully you signed up for the mailing list and that's how you found out about it. Otherwise, at some point here, we'll post the link in the chat and for how to get signed up for the mailing list and add the Sunday night call to your calendar. All right, Ian, the show is yours. Take it away.
All right, so obviously the game Crescendo was released yesterday, and this call for the most part is going to be more of a unstructured, kind of call talking about what people's initial reactions to the game is, what strategies people think will work, and questions about the game that people have. And we see a lot of interesting things that are unique in this game. Obviously, it looks a lot like 2013 Ultimate Ascent, but it also seems to have, a lot of differences in the lack of full court shooting and being a shooting game where you can only really hold one game piece at a time, which we haven't seen since Stronghold, really. So I'd like to know, what people's thoughts are about that to start with.
I think I was just a little disappointed that there was only one game piece being able to be held, but paired with the shooter, definitely makes it a lot more interesting to see how people are gonna fare with that, especially if the human player station is across the field and hard to see.
Yeah, and I think it also is going to make the choice between the amp and the speaker really difficult for teams, or choosing to do both. And I'm wondering what teams are thinking about for that trade-off right now.
We were kind of thinking that it's important to be able to do both, and that the amp is just something that can't be missed because of how many more points it gives. 2 scores into an amp and 1 into the speaker is worth more than 3 scores into the speaker.
Yeah, I agree with that. That was a realization that I made last night late when I was thinking about all the different ways to score. Is that if your speaker is not amplified, you should probably score in the amp.
Yeah, amping is super important, and having that communication with when you should be doing it with the people that are going to be shooting into the speaker is going to be important. I see a lot of similarities with last year's game as far as like across the field pickup and going back and forth entirely across the field. I don't know. I think cycle times are going to be similar to last year, maybe a little faster because you don't have to place. But still one game piece driving across the field to get it, picking some up off the floor. The sight lines of sight on this. We had a field set up in Nevis with some cardboard elements that we played around with, and they're going to be really bad depending on your driver station. It's going to be really hard to see what's going on.
Yeah, I agree. If you're in driver station 3, which is the single station on the opposite side of the speaker, and you have to load from the human player station, I think you're gonna have a really hard time being able to see your human player trying to help you line up.
Yeah, you're definitely going to probably need at least one drive camera, possibly 2, depending on like the shape of your robot. And then something else, one of our mentors ran kind of like the math on like the actual like what the possible outcomes of a match could look like. And basically, to win a match, you kind of have to be having 1 to like 1.5 bots just completely dedicated to that amp to get the max amount of points, to basically have a shot at winning the match. You have to be trying to amp and like put like a serious consideration into getting it charged.
With the poor vision and the human players being on the other side, I think that there is going to be like a necessity to use April tags to line up to make like quick loading and unloading.
Well, I was going to actually ask what was the point of the April tag at the human loading station, but now that you said that, that makes more sense actually.
Yeah, I also think that being able to amp is going to be super important, and I also think a lot of teams are going to write it off this year, especially because the kit bot shootings worth more points, and we're also going to see, from a standpoint of being worried, like, what if I don't have, a good shooter bot on my team that can take advantage of amping. I think there's going to be, that fear in a lot of teams, and I think it's almost going to become like what we saw with dedicated hatch bots in 2019, where they were both a rarity and a necessity on the field.
Back on the human player thing with April tags, I think the need to use the April tags is higher because of there's the dividers in that. If there were no dividers, and you could do adjusting like with the dropper with the human players last year, human player stations last year, this is going to be lining up and having a wide intake for human players is going to be important.
Yeah, that's part of like why our team, we specifically said we're going for ground take only, because the human player can always just throw it on the ground for you to pick up. There will always be something on the ground, no matter what like time of field it is. And although then you can't line up with April tags, but feasibly we know our programming team would be a big ask for them, because we're trying to be able to do basically everything in the match. And so asking them to also do vision wasn't feasible. So by just doing ground intake, it does mean your drives have a bit more work, but by having a drive camera or two that gives them clear sight, then that should help overcome a lot of it being hard for them to see. Because they may not have like human players to like direct them side to side, but they'll be able to like direct themselves.
So I had another thought with the the core petition, going back to that amplifier part. Do any of you think that it might be a strategy used by the opposing alliance to say, hey, while we have an upper hand, we are not going to do it, or is that something that's going to be more like super one of the easiest, not easy, but one of the common things that, hey, if the other person push the button, then we will, or is there going to be one where you push the button and then they were like, nope, we're not going to, and then because when that's going, you cannot amp up.
I think doing cooperation might be better for higher level teams, since it is kind of the tiebreaker. Those teams higher up in the scoreboard are going to care more about that, and they're going to want to do it more. But then lower level teams have the option to refuse that for them, and it can be kind of a strategy, especially in quals. If you have two higher level teams going up against each other, sure, they might want to do the cooperation, but if you have a higher level quals alliance against a lower level quals alliance, they're probably going to refuse that because they don't want those teams to be able to do that.
I think in earlier weeks we might see the cooperation happen a lot more, like just as a default thing that all the teams do, but in later weeks, and especially going into champs, I think when there's contested matches, we're going to see it happen a lot less often and a lot more deception happening from those teams, especially because it benefits each team individually in terms of winning the match to not cooperate. And so, especially, obviously there's the ranking point threshold reducing, but if you're a team that thinks that it's not going to make a difference whether the alliance is going to go well over the threshold either way, or the alliance isn't going to be able to make that threshold, then I think we're going to see a lot of teams focused on winning the match, which is valued more. And so in that case, they're not going to want to, spend half of opportunity to amp on that. And I think that we might see a lot of like, if there's a first seed going against a second seed, the second seed has, slightly better partners, but it's still going to be a close match. And they want to make it so that that first seed doesn't get those 4 ranking points in a match. They might decide to, not cooperate, say, we think that we can get those 4 ranking points, but we don't think our opponents can unless it's reduced. And I think we could see that, really harming or, really being a strategic aspect of ranking manipulation that we'll see play out.
I agree with Sydney's take on it quite a bit. I think if you're in quals and you're on a weak alliance up against a strong alliance, I say probably don't cooperate. I think that's going to be a thing.
Yeah, because 45 seconds is a lot of time to not amp up while they're amping up and getting higher bonus points and you being a nice guy.
Jeremiah, can you expand on that a little bit? What do you mean by the 45 seconds is a long time to not? Did you say to not be able to amp up?
Well, don't you? Because my understanding is because you can only do the core petition the first 45 seconds. So if maybe I shouldn't have said 45 seconds, but if you were one of, you did that initially, well, however many seconds left within our first 45 seconds, they can be scoring, 10, 20 points, while you are, trailing behind, or you losing that potential of, getting extra points because then you can't, amp up your amplifier while that light is on.
Is that true though? That was not my understanding of the rule. Does anyone else?
My understanding of it was that you have 45 seconds where you have an opportunity to cooperate. After that, you can't cooperate with them anymore, and it has no meaning on whether or not you can amp. However, it does use up one of your notes that you could use to amp.
Yeah, I think that was my understanding as well, is that it subtracts one from your potential notes to use to amp up. You still score the point, right? You still score that 1 point for placing the note in the amplifier. But now, instead of scoring one more to be able to amplify, you are back to 0 and you have to score 2. Or if you had to, you subtract 1 and now you got to score another one before you can amplify again.
Well, and that's what I was thinking. You can still get the 1 point when you score in the amplifier, but your speaker, you don't have that 10 seconds. That's you don't have that 10 seconds where you get bonus points for I think it's 5 points when it's amplified. You get right.
Right, but you can go get another note, stick it in there, and then you will be able to amplify.
Oh, okay. So what is the point when it's not amplified? Because I watched that video quite a few times and I didn't see it. In the speaker, what do you get when you don't amplify, when it's not amplified?
It's 2 points when it's not amplified, and then it's 5 when it's amplified.
Thank you.
How much do you think we will be seeing teams score in the speaker unamplified during the game? Because I think that there's a big question of, like, do you save your notes to play in the speaker until it's amplified? Do you stockpile them in the area? How do we think that teams will be handling that?
Well, I think for one that you should be trying to focus enough on amplification that you shouldn't have to wait too long. But also, I mean, if it's it's going to be 20 seconds, or you could do another cycle before it will be amped, then you should probably just shoot it and go get another one. But if it's 5 seconds or so waiting, you're probably not going to be able to get another piece and get back there to shoot. Because if you're ready to shoot, then you have at least a chance of getting another cycle in, possibly, and getting 2 per amp zone. So you if it's going to be a long time, then yes, there is an argument for shooting it and getting another one. But if it's a close time, then you probably want to just wait. But it's probably going to be hard to say that time until we get into actual match play.
Well, this game, do you think it's going to be a common strategy where to go if you have a robot that can do the amplifiers? Be like, hey, you just keep putting game pieces in there, and somebody can be hauling, and then one person is scoring. But then when you do that, though, what you also open up is, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's an element from this game that seems to be like, with infinite recharge, is not infinite recharge, rapid react is, you can go and play defense as long as they're not docked against their podium, as long as they're not in a safety zone, you can disrupt, their scoring their scoring chances by even just bumping into that robot. That would even knock off the attacks from being 100% accurate. So
That's why you want to have your robot pressed up against the speaker and keep your movement going, because they're not going to be able to push you off.
So if you aren't against the speaker, they can't touch you.
No, they can touch you, but if you're pushed against it, they're not going to move you. If your wheels are like actively pushing against it, your shooter shouldn't take but a second or two to shoot, right?
And even if you have a source drive, you can just turn all those wheels inward, right? That should still give you,
If your wheels are pointing at it, it's tough to push you sideways. I mean, they're not going to throw it off that much.
Okay.
If you're right against it, right?
Yeah.
And if you're up against the stage, they can't touch you. Fall for touching you. Just like shooting from the hanging platform, kind of, a couple years ago.
I believe that stage invincibility or rule only activates in the ending moments of the game.
Well, no, there's the podium that you can
Podium, yeah.
It's like attached to the stage.
Okay.
And it has like a pretty good shot to the speaker.
I got maybe at a 45, slight 45-degree angle if you have to, Well, do they have that on both sides, on the left and the right?
The podium, I think, is just the face facing the driver's station, I believe.
No, I'm talking about the safe zone where you can just dock and against do they have it on the left or the right, or
It's
just
on the way it is there's the one point of the triangle is facing the driver's stations, and then there's two like in the back, and the one facing it has it. So because also the other two you wouldn't necessarily even be able to really get a good shot on.
Correct.
Okay.
I do think defense around that speaker is going to be hard. There's going to be a couple teams that have the one 3D printed TPU tire with like L4, and they're just going to spend their entire time just keeping people away from that, which, especially with the weird angle that the speaker's at, you have to getting close makes it a lot easier to shoot.
I'm not certain, and maybe it's because I've gone through just the past game, which didn't have much defense at all in it. I'm not sure we're going to see too much defense in this game, because while it does seem that the choke points will make a defensive robot able to be disruptive, I don't think the value that playing defense subtracts from the opponent's lines will be able to make up for the value of losing a third robot that's either charging up the amp or scoring the notes that they've gotten during an amplified period. What I think might happen is, like with a second pick robot, if it's like, let's say, a Kitbot on Swerve or something like that, we could see them intake a game piece and then wait around for the amplification to begin and play defense in the time frame, between it getting amplified and them scoring again. But I don't necessarily think that there will be fully focused defenders in this game, although I could be wrong. I haven't experienced enough FRC to really know.
I do think it'll be a common, my mechanism broke, I'll go play defense now.
One thing I could see is a lot of momentary defense too, of like, especially if you're shooting not somewhere where it's either if you're not shooting from the podium or like against the wall where it's harder for them to hit you, they could just, as they're going by, tap you mess up your aim and continue on their way without really causing much of an impact. And so defense might not be something that like a full bot would do, but depending on who you're against, it could be something where you're like, you tell your alliance partners to everyone, hey, this bot, if you tap them, when they shoot from out here, just tap them and you can mess it up if you get the chance as like you're going by type situation.
Yeah,
but I don't think a full-fledged defense bot, although it could be effective, especially like if someone broke, there's a lot you can do with it. But as a like focus bot, I don't think it would be a good point, especially since there's the kit bot. So at the very least, you could be able to have a shooter this year with like pre-out their instructions.
Yeah, and I also would like to see if like teams decide, okay, when our opponents amplify, we play really heavy defense to make it so that like if you delay them even by a couple seconds, they don't score the rings while it's amplified. I think that could also be a possibility.
I think that if your alliance has the potential to get the scoring ranking point, you won't be able to do that if you have a bot play defense more than half the match. So I think that you'll probably only see dedicated defenses from alliances who don't think they have enough offensive power to get that ranking point. So rather than trying to get the ranking point, they may put somebody on defense to try to stop the other alliance from getting the ranking point.
In 2022, defense was very common. And I think it was a really big deal, especially in finals, to make sure that people just aren't getting those points that they think they'll be able to get. And especially having a year where defense was, I'd like to say, illegal. I think people aren't going to be designing for it this year and don't really expect it to happen as much as they did in 2022. So therefore, drivers may not be as experienced both in defense or even in offense against defense. So it may be a very valid thing that in the first couple of weeks, even in the incidental defense, people are going to be totally thrown off, and their times that they're going to say in the pits when pit scouting are going to be completely different because they just aren't expecting that defense.
So speaking of defense, the other thing, because I know we played this strategy one time against Thunder Robotics when we're doing an NMRC open invitation with Rapid React, because you could carry 2 game pieces. So if you bump the robot, it shakes the camera up a little bit, so the second game piece would not really land in. But with a game that has only 1 game piece, I don't think that might have that same impact, because by the time you get to them, that person already would have shot, make their shot, and they would have probably already scored that. So, I don't know. It's kind of tricky with, having, I don't know how much until I see an actual real field in person to see how much room do you have behind the stage and between the stage and the speaker. To have 3 robots and then another robot comes in that area to play interference or whatnot, looks like a hot spaghetti mess.
And like, in my opinion, feasibly, the best one with defense this year would be kind of not so much the disrupting the shot works good for momentary defense, but let's say like you break and you need to play full defense. Really, the best, probably most effective way would be preventing a team from getting to their shooting point, which does mean you kind of need to know where they shoot from, but preventing them from getting there, preventing them from getting to the intake, just slowing them down, because realistically, you're not going to be able to fully stop them. But if you can make their cycle go from 10 seconds to 30 seconds because you're bugging them so much, you just possibly cost them 2 cycles, which can be a lot of points.
As we're comparing this game to 2022, the other thoughts that I had around that were game piece starvation was a big deal in 2022, just because of the low number of game pieces. And I don't know if we're necessarily going to see that as a defensive element this year. And also, given that each alliance has their own area that's scoring, yes, robots will be crossing when we cross the field to go get notes from the human player, but it's not like everybody's surrounding one central target. So kind of like charged up in a way. I think teams are just going to kind of be separated, and that momentary defense is going to, like Lauren's talking about, is going to be a lot more important than dedicated defense.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Lexi. 2022 had a limited number of pieces, so defense was more possible from like keeping people from being able to pick them up. With there being 107 pieces, there's absolutely no way you're going to have them all played. So pieces, you're not going to be able to do a starve defense.
Yeah, I think that the way game piece allocation this year is very similar to rapid or charged up. I'm too tired for this. Where that because you kind of have the preloads, but then you also have just a few in the center that teams are going to fight over before starting their full field cycles. But what's interesting about those central pieces this year is that they're going to be shared during autonomous, and I wonder how teams are going to handle that for their auto routines and how competitive people think that will be, both at the regional level and eventually the championship level.
You're referring to multiple teams are saying, hey, I've got a 4-note auto or a 3-note auto, and I want to be able to do my auto.
The auto specifically, because the rings on the center line, either team can intake them during auto, and both teams are allowed to go towards the center line during auto as long as their bumpers don't fully cross it. Right. Interaction, how it's going to play out. Because I don't think we've seen something like that in an FRC game before, except for maybe the can races in 2015, but there wasn't any actual robot to robot interaction.
I think that by week 4 or 5, we might see some of that, but I would be surprised if we saw a lot of midfield collisions in the early weeks.
Yeah. At regional level, it probably won't come into play really much until even the playoffs, because feasibly having 2 robots going against each other that could have that would have already picked up their one and shot their one, picked up another, shot that, or placed it in the amp or in the trap or wherever, then having time to go to center and get one, there's not going to be a huge amount, and the chances you guys going up against each other and then going for the same one isn't necessarily the highest. So it might be something that happens very, very occasionally. That's something also your scouting in theory could possibly tell you, where if you know what your opponent's autos are, then you might be able to also know that they might be trying to go for it and maybe not go for it. But at a championship level, it's probably something that will happen quite a bit.
Yeah, it's kind of a scary proposition if you have an intake to run to that middle. If you have an intake outside your bumpers and to run to the middle and worry that somebody's going to go for the same one in the middle, and then you might be stuck for the entire match with a broken intake. It's a high risk, low reward.
Well, isn't that why I think they might have put in those emergency e-stops during auto too? Because if you saw that was happening, it might be prudent to push that and stop your robot instead of having a collision.
So then it becomes a game of chicken of who's going to hit their e-stop first.
My intake is tougher than your intake.
Ooh.
Or even just running through and sweeping all them out of the way. So if they have a pre-designed path plan that isn't using a camera to locate them very well, you could just sweep them. I don't know. There's options there.
Okay. I don't want to be the guy who asks a different question from this, but if you guys don't, unless somebody else has something else to keep talking about this, I have a different question.
Well, I have another question about auto, but we can either hold it or do it now. Ian, what do you want to do?
Go ahead, Scotty.
I think there's a couple people who still have things to say about auto.
Okay.
But then we can move on to your question after we finish discussing the autonomous period.
My question that I'd like to get feedback from the group on with auto is if you have a multi-game piece auto, so let's say, for example, those game pieces are actually fairly close together. In theory, you could score the one you have and then pick up and score all three in 15 seconds. That's a robot moving a lot in a pretty tight area. And my question, and what people's thoughts on this is, there are a lot of teams, especially in early weeks, where they just don't get autos done. They ran out of time. They got the robot 2 days before the competition. And so all they can do is score and then drive straight for 3 seconds. It's going to be really hard to score and drive straight for 3 seconds and not get in the way of a multi-game element robot, because you're all going to be in the same spot. And if you're just going to try to drive straight to cross the line, it's going to be really hard to find a place you can drive straight without running the risk of running into a partner robot that's trying to do a multi-piece auto. Does anyone think that's our concern, or think that teams will be able to find a way around that?
Well, I'd say something. There's 3 robots. There's 3 game pieces right in front of you. I would say maybe don't try to go for the other ones. There's the ones in the center that you could reach. Or you could try to do something that might take a bit more time, like scoring in the amp, or even scoring in like the trap in auto. So then, because just when you try to go behind them, that basically it means you have a robot either has to delay when they leave, or they just don't move in auto, which is costing you that leave point, no matter what. And because although you may not get that piece scored every time, you could just always pick it up at some point, or they could pick it up just immediately after. And I mean, although it may not get scored in auto, which is a negative, it's still going to get scored. And I fear the fact that there's going to be a lot of robots that are going to be able to move backwards. And I just don't know if it's kind of worth it to try to do autos that go behind the other robots when you can just do autos that do like a more advanced task with the note.
What I think is interesting is that because the scoring for auto is the same as the scoring when it's already amped up, I'm not sure missing pieces in auto in the high goal I'm not sure if it's going to be, I think it's going to be an advantage time that every single team uses, but I'm not sure it's going to be as crucial of a time to use as it was in previous years, especially because I think the delay for robots isn't going to be in taking and shooting. I think the delay is going to be, crossing that full field and getting back with game pieces. So part of me wonders if a better use of time is just to make sure as many of the center line contested game pieces are in your area as possible, right? To start teleop strong, you get your first amp and then you score the 4 whatever number of rings that you have gotten into your area.
But like Scott was saying, early weeks, there are a lot of robots that don't move or can just move a little bit backward and get out of their zone. And if you have a team that can pick up 2 or 3 of those other placed game pieces, that's 10 to 15 points. And that's a huge advantage to start out the beginning of the game up by 10 points rather than just get the couple points to leave. And if you can work with those teams and help them get an auto that helps them just back up over on the other side, the problem is that amp is right over there by those 3 game pieces. And there may be teams that can only score in that amp and then have to back out. And then do they move one of those game pieces on you or get in your way to prevent your auto from working, or even worse, as your intake is down, run into your intake and destroy your intake. So it's going to take a lot of coordination at these early week events to say, okay, we can consistently pick up 2 or 3 of those pieces and score them. Can you guys go over to the other side and just back out, or can you score and move, or how can we work together to get the most points that we possibly can during auto?
Yeah, I think where I'm coming from is that I would almost rather have a team shoot and not cross the line, assuming they can shoot and score. Shoot and not cross the line, and then let a team that could pick up all three and score them do that. Because if you score all your preloads and those 3 nodes, that's 6. That means you only have to cycle 3 each if you use the cooperation point for the entire rest of the match to get your ranking point. And I feel like that ranking point is going to be the hardest ranking point to get. And I'd rather sacrifice not crossing the line than sacrifice getting that ranking point. I mean, if each team only had to do 3 cycles the rest of the match, that feels like a huge advantage coming out of auto, even if you didn't get cross the line points for 1 or 2 of your robots.
I had a kind of related question of no one has said anything about scoring in the amp in auto. Is that a dead strategy? And you can tell me go read the manual, so I apologize, but does scoring in the amp in auto start the process of amplifying in teleop, or are those completely not? Okay.
It does. It gives double points for scoring in the amp, but I think teams who have a shooter are going to want to shoot just because the score differential for shooting, it's basically, free amped up time compared to, maybe getting the amp 1 cycle sooner in teleop.
Sure, that makes sense.
I could see a benefit to scoring the amp because you can line up almost right next to the amp, drive up a little bit, dump it in the amp, then go to the center line and pick up another element and maybe get driven back in time to score that one. So if you're partnered with a team that can do 2, let's say that you're partnered with 2 robots. One says, I can pick up 2 notes and score those. And the other robot says, I can pick up 1 and score those. Then having it out of this is, hey, cool, I'll just dump it in the amp and run to the center line and try to snag one of those. I think it's a very specific scenario, but I think I'm going to encourage our programmers to put that auto on the list and hope, if we get all the other autos done, I think there's a place for that could be a viable option in auto.
And also, I'd say the amp offers the possibility of if you need that competition bonus, you already have it in there ready to hit the button. You don't have to go and get it doing the thing because the competition you can only hit again in the game. And in case something happens to like your amp bot or something, you have it there ready to go.
And then I had a question because Lauren, I thought you stated that you could maybe put one of the game pieces in the trap during autonomous. Did you misspeak or is that really true?
From how we interpret the game, we couldn't find anything that said you couldn't score in there. It's just that they don't count the score until the end. And it was more of like our programmers kind of thought it would be funny to like do that just for the heck of it. Not that we necessarily would, but it'd be funny to score in the trap in auto.
Lauren, you're going to make them change the rule or clarify it more.
Oh, don't worry. We think we already found a mistake in the rulebook. There's one. Apparently, the red side is half an inch longer than the blue side.
Yeah, that seems like it was a mistake in the documentation on those drawings, but heard the first mention of the trap here, and I think that's kind of the elephant in the room with this game. That is the trap a trap? Is it going to be something that, because I can see it being, and I've been going back and forth on this today because I was building a trap in my house, and I can't tell if it's going to be either something that wins regionals or something that's going to be a really big distraction for a lot of teams that could be spent on better things. And I think that's going to be a hard trade-off.
It's the matter of getting that ranking point. Because basically, if you don't have anyone that can score in the trap, you kind of have to have all 3 bots climbing or have a good human player. And like it just, without scoring in the trap, it's a lot harder to get that ranking point. But it's not something that every team should attempt. It is hard, and it's one of the biggest problems. Like in the past years, we've only been trained to really climb, but hang. This you have to climb up so you can actually physically reach it. Unless you try to shoot it, but shooting isn't necessarily going to be the most reliable way of getting it in there. And like if you miss with the shoot, there's no way to, and like it gets stuck in there. Well, that one's kind of just stuck.
Well, there's also the weighted flap, so teams are going to have to lean against it to open it first, and so that's another.
That was like
thing that
where the like shooting it in isn't very reliable because yes, it's a weighted flap. It's you can't. In theory, there's probably someone that's going to figure out a way to shoot it in there. That's not going to be really the most reliable. It's kind of like the jumping robot. Yes, you could jump on the ball. Was it the most helpful thing? No. Is shooting the thing into the trap the most helpful? No, not really. So really you have to actually make a mechanism that can reach up there, but also one that can pull you up on the chain. Not just hang, but like pull you up on there.
And am I right by reading that there's no way you can reach it from the ground? You have to be on the chain, correct?
Yes, because you can go up to 4 feet, and the base of it is 4 feet 8 inches. So there really isn't a way to reach it from the ground.
The only other thoughts that we had discussed a little bit with the trap yesterday was that I think we will see definitely not many teams, but there will be teams who say, okay, we need to be prepared if one of our alliance members ends up not being able to climb, like getting the trap shaves off half of the like the points needed for the ranking point. And so teams that want to, obviously they can't get everything by themselves to get all the ranking points, but want to get as close to that self-sufficiency as possible, will probably figure out ways to score in the trap, just to kind of overcome those scenarios where your alliance partner disconnects or breaks in a way that they can't climb and not everybody can get on stage at the end of the match.
I think that the trap is going to be very important for a couple of reasons. One is what Lexi said in our strategy discussion, and this is a big problem with Steamworks, is you couldn't get that ranking point in Steamworks unless all 3 of your robots were operable at the end of the game. And so this gives you an opportunity to be able to get that ranking point with only 2 robots if one of them could put in the trap. The other reason I think trapping is going to be very important is that I suspect that's going to move, even if your team has struggled all day long and you've had some bad luck, it's going to move you right to the top of the pick list, especially as a second pick, so a third robot in alliance, if you can trap. Even if it takes you half the match to get up there and climb up there and trap, I feel like that's going to be a big thing of that. What makes the best second pick robot? I feel like trapping will set you apart from everyone else if your robot's able to do that.
But in playoffs, the ranking points don't matter. So why would trapping going into playoffs actually be a good thing?
Well, that's a good point. Yeah, it's only 5 points. So
yeah, I mean, I
okay.
agree.
I retract my second part of that statement. So that's a very valid point.
I think getting that 4th ranking point, getting that, what is it, the melody ranking point, is going to be very tough. Because if you have a robot that can't climb in your alliance, if you don't get one in the trap, you're not getting it.
Well, there's always the option of doing a harmony climb with a second robot and then having the human player be able to do the ring toss.
But that still doesn't get it without the trap.
No, because that would hit 10 points because
yeah, you're right. That would hit 10 points. Yeah, you're right.
But that's still, difficult. And I think the question with how valuable the trap is comes down to the trap being, undeniable points. Like, because if we look at in 2022, for example, the difference between the mid bar and the traversal rung was only 9 points, right? So it's, if you think of it as like a 9-point advantage to that. And I think that the games of Rapid React were slightly higher scoring, like 1.5 times maybe higher scoring compared to what this game will see. And so I think at 5 points, that's still going to be, a very valuable addition to an alliance at the end game that could swing matches, but I'm not sure, by how much will it swing matches and how much is it worth, potentially adding an extra mechanism to a robot to be able to do that. Is that something for only alliance captains and those who want to, rank in the top 8 be worrying about?
Well, the one thing take and consider is it's worth 5 points, the exact same as an amplified thing. Well, if you think you can get more than like one amplified note in and like do something else and then climb, putting something in the trap is going to be worth less than that. So for something like a bot that like in playoffs, your bot who can't necessarily, it might take them longer to get 2 like things scored versus the trap, it would be worth more for them to do the trap. But for like someone who's a really fast shooter or can get in the amp and get it charged and then shoot, or some combination of that, it would technically be worth more to do that over scoring in the trap. So in some ways, it kind of depends on the speed and the cycle time of your robots.
I've only read through the manual once, but you can put 1 in each trap, right? And get 5 points per. So that's 15 points if you have a robot that can do a trap really well.
Sure, but that means you're going to have to be able to climb up and climb down. And that is going to be a lot harder than I think.
But if you have the mechanism that can do that, though, then maybe you start doing that early on while other people are doing that, and that would be your, you start your end game before the buzzer goes,
But again, the principle of can you score more points elsewhere faster still applies. Yes, because there's 3, that's still 5 points. But if they're still able to score points faster elsewhere, it isn't necessarily worth it for them to be scoring those. Because they can.
It is because you get the RP. If you can score all 3 traps, you get the RP.
In qualification, yes, it's probably worth. In playoffs, when you just need points, it's not going to be worth it necessarily to do them if you have someone who can do something else faster.
My main concern with the trap is that the amount of time that to test it, you'll need the robot just fully to yourself to like finely tune it, and it's going to take a while because it's dependent on a climb, the CG of the robot, and in my opinion, would be more beneficial to spend that time on getting instead of a 1-ring auto, you get a 2-ring auto, a 3-ring auto, maybe. I feel like it would be cheaper, it would be lighter to work on your auto rather than doing a trap.
Jesse, I want to point out that you can't get the ranking point unless you have at least 2 robots hanging.
Correct.
So,
that's true.
That's going to be probably the biggest thing keeping you from getting that ranking point is you're going to be in a match that it doesn't have other people that can climb. And week 1, it's hard to gauge, right? Because there's all these different things that you need to do, and are you going to be? And even if you get 2 to climb, you getting the 10 points is going to be challenging still. I think 4 ranking points is going to be early on is going to be very difficult.
I think I agree with everything you guys have said. If you go back and look at Steamworks and you watch Steamworks regionals, or you just look at how the rankings points shook out in Steamworks, there were a lot of matches where 2 robots, all 3 robots couldn't get climbed. It happened a lot.
And did that keep you from getting that ranking point then?
And that kept you from getting the ranking point. And so likewise here, if you get 2 robots up, but you can't get that 3rd one up in the air, having the trap that's gonna elevate your ranking very quickly throughout the tournament, because I think it's going to be very hard. I think less in the early days, we might have less than half the matches where 3 robots climb.
Oh, I would, yeah.
But you might have 80% where at least 2 climb. And so, having that trap ability,
you think it'll be that high?
Well, we'll see. I mean, you just have to get off the ground. Like for Steamworks, you had to get up and you had to engage a light. but you just got to get off the ground. So even just a 6-inch stroke piston or a winch that just gets up a little ways is
That's
all
true.
it might take.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see what it actually shakes out. But I'm, Ian started this conversation of, is it a trap or is it real? And personally, I think it's a real thing that if you have the ability to do it, you should do it. Now, I forgot who it was. I'm sorry. I think it might have been Quentin. Quentin makes an excellent point. If you're running short on time, get better autos. I think better autos are going to make a big difference, more than that trap.
Especially
Yeah.
with, especially with defensive autos being a thing now. If you can score one and then fly out to the center of the field and just ram all of those and knock those points over to your side of the field, it would not be good for. That would be a good way to disrupt autos. You'd have to be pretty brave with breaking your robot. Your pit might hate your coders, but.
And you have to be pretty brave with breaking the rules too, because you can only control one at a time.
Yeah.
Well, if you could outtake it really fast after you intook it, or I think from the safety perspective, I know that the Minnesota U of M Robot in 3 Days team has figured out how to do an intake where the game piece goes completely under the bumpers. And I wonder if we think that those types of intakes are going to be more popular because of the auto dangers.
U of M. Oops, sorry.
Yeah, I'm looking at trying to do a prototype like that too. And the thing that concerns me about it is that once you intake one, as you're driving back to score it, if you run over another one, then you're controlling two. So you'd have to have some kind of block that would block it off as you're transporting one that you have in your possession. Otherwise, as soon as you run over one, you're automatically in control of two, and that's a problem. But yeah, I like that design. It's cool. And Cranberry Alarm, I think, was playing with that too, or one of the other ones I saw. But yeah, that underneath the robot intake is kind of neat.
Another thing with the defensive auto, you don't even have to intake it. If you have your bumpers all the way to the ground or something, and you just hit you would need swerve or godforsaken mechanism, but you need to you could just hit those at a 45-degree angle, just to, because they slide, the notes slide like a puck on ice. So if you are going fast enough, that should deflect them 2-3 feet.
But with the defensive auto, the thing is, the other team can just go and pick them up afterwards. It might slow them down a bit. They might not get an auto, but you're not going to be able to control all 5 at once. You can't with the rules. You only have 3 bots, and each one can only control 1. So there's always going to be at least 2 that the other team would get. And yes, and you're risking your bot getting penalties, because if you're to push them inside without picking them up, you'll most likely have to cross the line, which means you're open to penalties, which, although they're less than last year, penalties still can easily make or break a match.
I guess it would kind of depend on what the refs call momentary contact. If you're just bashing through there and hitting them with your bumper.
Well, I know that there were autos in Rapid React that intook 3 game pieces at once, abusing the momentary rules, and I think that we might see something like that again potentially, or just something that can outtake really quickly and not care about where it lands, as long as it doesn't land near the opponent's side.
But also, I would say as a ref, I mean, I'm not a ref, but if you're clearly trying to push them all, like your auto just push them away and contact them multiple when doing that, even if it's just momentary, if it gets any longer, they could very easily call that, and there's a high probability they would, because it's clear intent. If it goes slightly over, it's hard to tell, and there wasn't intent, they're not necessarily going to call it. But if it's an auto, there's probably there's a lot of argument for clear intent on that, and that it wasn't accidental. So there's very high likelihood that if you try to push them all at like the same time or like a couple at a time, there's a very good chance you're going to get that penalty called.
I just kind of had a question about what people were thinking for designing shooters. Our team had a little bit of discussion about whether it'd be worth it to do 2 wheels on one side or like 1 wheel on one side, or if it was worth it to kind of throw like no spin notes at all, if that might improve accuracy or decrease accuracy. We were going to do testing with that, but I just want to know other people's thoughts.
From being able to throw the notes on an actual field, throwing them without any spin they don't really travel distance very well, especially with them being foam. They just kind of flip through the air and go maybe 6 feet versus putting a spin on them. You can throw them almost fully across the field. And it works a whole lot better, especially as like a Frisbee. Obviously doing testing with that is going to be kind of hard without making a mock-up with motors because you don't really get that chance with drills. But it's definitely worth it to put that spin on there.
I've seen some videos with wheels on both sides that went way better than I was expecting. And I think that if you're shooting from the subwoofer, I don't think it's going to matter. I don't think if you have spin or not, it's not going to matter. I do agree with Sydney that if you're shooting from distance, spin is probably going to be important to stabilize that ring. I will say, based on our rapid react experience, though, we had a 2-wheeled shooter and we could run them at different speeds and we could impart us the amount of spin that we wanted. So both wheels were pushing it forward, but one was pushing it faster, so we could impart a different amount of spin on it. And that was interesting. I don't know that it really made that big of a difference to have super high spin versus a slow amount of spin. But when you're doing your prototyping, don't just discount a 2-wheeled shooter because you want spin, because you could spin them at different rates and you might get enough spin to do what you're looking for.
Also, along with testing, I haven't obviously with your arm, it might not be as well as doing it with motors, but I am not sure if you could put a curve on it like you could with a Frisbee. People might be able to find that in testing, but I kind of doubt it with how large they are. But we may see later in the season that people are curving them from across the field and being able to get them in at weird angles.
Also, are people deciding to go more with variable shooter designs or more constant angle shooter designs?
I would say we have a driver who being able to stop on the line, that doesn't work very well for her. We just chose going straight for the subwoofer type, just hit that, and she doesn't. And so one, it's a lot hard to play defense against this, and two, she doesn't have to spend time trying to line up. She just goes there, she hits it, it gets shot, and she goes. Because although variable could be done, it's if you're like fully focusing on shooting, I could see the argument for it. But since we want to do more than just shooting, it's a lot of resource commitment and it adds a lot more complexity to create a shooter that you can rotate the angle of versus just picking a shot line basically, or a shot point.
I think what he may have been referring to is the angle of the shooter vertically. So like he saw the kit bot one can't score in the amp at all just because of the angle prevents it from doing it. So have a pneumatic up and down system, so like a low amp and then a pneumatically raised high for the speaker. But I could be wrong. I'm not sure what Paul was referring to, I guess.
A little of both. I was just wondering. We're debating about whether we want to actually be able to move our shooter angle at all.
Well, we had this discussion in our design meeting, and I think that we'll probably end up with at least two positions. So you could shoot from the subwoofer or shoot from the line where the rings are lined up, basically the podium. So you could shoot from the podium or you could shoot from the subwoofer with maybe a pneumatic piston. I'd like to see us try to do a variable angle so we could really shoot from anywhere. But I think at a minimum, we'll make sure that we can shoot from the podium or shoot from the subwoofer, because I think there's reasons to do both.
Yeah.
Don't you want to do a variable angle somewhat if you intend on using docking by the the podium to shoot, because I don't think that you will have the same angular you won't have the same result push against the speaker versus just stop push against the speaker versus when you're backed up. Sorry guys.
I was doing some stuff in CAD to figure out how big is that opening as you get farther and farther away. It's an 18-inch opening, so if you're looking at it from the subwoofer, it looks like a 17-inch opening, and if you look at it from the podium, it looks like a 13, 12-ish opening, and if you look at it from the line that separates the wing from center field, it looks like a 9-inch opening, and so. I don't know. I feel like everybody's going to shoot from their wing. I think if we have people that are shooting, or they're probably going to shoot from their podium forward. If we have people that are making it from further back than their podium, man, they must have to fling that thing at a crazy high speed, because there basically can't be any arc on the game element if it has any chance of going in at all. So I don't know. I feel like most of the shots are going to be from the podium in. I really don't think that very many people are going to shoot from further back than that. And the difference is 3 feet versus 10 feet. I mean, or 9 feet. So there's really not that much distance of variability. 2 shooting positions might be all you need. I'm going to encourage my team to think about a fully variable system, but I think 2 would probably be sufficient for almost all teams.
Do we think that 2 shooting positions are I haven't looked at the angles too much, but do you think a team would be able to get away with like a middle shooting angle and just adjust the speed that they launch it at or something like that and be able to shoot from both the subwoofer and the like whatever the protected zone's called? I haven't looked at it enough to actually know though, so I might have to take a look at that.
You raise a good point. Changing the speed may be all you really need to do. The dead zone of where you can make it, and some place in the middle where you're going to miss, that might get really small, but just by changing the speed. That's a really good point, Ian. I hadn't thought of that.
I had like some kind of a silly idea. Is it possible to like have a robot that sits at the source and shoots them across to the other side for other teammates to shoot them in and score on an area where they have like line of sight to it?
You have to be, I think, at least out of your opponent's wing area before you can start shooting them. That's like a quarter of the field, I want to say. Is it a full third of the field?
Probably close to it.
You can't. So there's 3 parts of the field. There's your wing, their wing, and the center part. You cannot shoot anything that crosses both lines. So you can shoot from the center into your wing, or you can shoot from their wing into the center, but you can't cross from one wing to the next. And in autonomous, you can't cross the line. You cannot shoot across any line in auto. So in auto, if you want to shoot, you have to get into your wing. If you go to the center line and pick one up, you have to drive into your wing to shoot. So you're not allowed to shoot across that line at all in auto.
Yeah, it's kind of like icing in hockey, right? You can't cross multiple lines with it in the air.
I had an unrelated question / topic. If people have more they wanted to say about variable shooting, I can definitely hold. But if people don't or want to move on, then mine was related to Kitbot. So last year, I think if I was talking to a team who was kind of lower resource, I would have, I would have not after the fact, I would have said, focus on, filling in the bottom row. Like, don't worry about the top two row. Like, watching the game all the time. That's probably what I would tell a lower resource team. This year they have the kit bot. What would be some advice to a team who doesn't have a lot of resource? They've built the kit bot. Like, what now? And they have like 3 weeks left or something like that. My advice would probably be put some hooks on it so you can climb and some pneumatic pistons. I'm just wondering if anybody has any other thoughts about kind of lower resource teams. What would be the next step after the kit bot, or a suggestion?
My advice: don't build a kitbot shooter. Build a kitbot amp filler. I think if you're a lower resource team and you have decided that you're only going to do one thing, I think you should be filling the amp, and then climb. Yeah, if you for sure climb. But I would say, yeah, make sure your robot can climb, and then your mechanism for scoring. I would highly recommend a team focus on the amp, not the shooter, because I think the amp is going to be harder than shooting. Honestly, I think the amp's going to be harder than shooting because it's so shallow, and you got to get right up to it to place it. And I think the amp is super important. I don't remember who brought it up, but you got to score on the amp twice in one shot. That gets you more points than 3 shots in the speaker. So, yeah, I would focus on the amp. That's my advice. And climb.
I think I agree with what Scott said. I think it's a really interesting dynamic that this year the quote unquote low goal seems to be the harder challenge compared to what typically is. But I'd also kind of, be wondering what, if a robot, right, that's really good ranks number 1 at an event, right, and they had a choice between a really good shooting bot and a really good amp bot for their first pick, right, or a average bot that does both, what would probably be that number 1 seed bot looking to pick? And that's something I've been going over in my head, and I can't really put a finger on it.
Ian, that's exactly why I asked the question. So, and I don't have an answer either. So, thanks for bringing that up.
The cranberry pie robot in 3 days. They tried various scenarios trying to get that thing to work, and none of them worked except when you put a churro and when you shoot it. But then that's a mechanism that you can't put a churro on the amp, or you have to bring something that can sit from your robot that will rest on that. So when you shoot it, then it will fall in. However, there was another one I think there was another. If I feel like if you can roll it up and then bring it right on and then just kind of roll it back in, that seems like probably a mechanism that but shooting it, I don't think anything shot in there would just sit in there easily.
I do have one complaint about the cranberry alarm video, and it is they were holding that with their hands and they were not holding it in the same place every time.
Exactly.
So we have no idea how hard it is. That does not tell us anything.
I noticed that, so I'm like, wow, your hands kind of fluctuating all over the place there, but
I think that if you wanted to do really well, I think it'd be better to do both, because if you were to put in, like, if you were to go full on amp, there is the 10 seconds that the amp is active, where any points that you put into there or any notes that you put into the amp will not be counted towards the next amplification. So there will be like a 10-second window for you to possibly score into the speaker, which could be an extra 5 points rather than sitting around waiting for the amp to turn off of the cooldown.
Well, I don't necessarily think the cooldown is as big of a thing as people made it out to be, just because in FRC games, even the best teams are taking longer than 10 seconds to complete a cycle. And what I am thinking more about is that if you're a shooting bot, right, the only time where your scoring is actually worthwhile is in those small 10-second pockets. So if you look at, full game time of when is amping more valuable and when is the speaker more valuable, I think that the amp is potentially going to be more valuable for longer portions of the game, if that makes sense, counterintuitively.
No, I 100% agree. I think amping is more important. The other thing that I worry about too is this 10 seconds. If the 10 seconds is when it actually drops all the way down and runs through the beam and breaks the beam and scores, you really might only have 7 or 8 seconds.
You get 13 total seconds.
Oh, you do get 13. Oh, excellent. That makes me feel better about it.
1.5 seconds for it to count. So it's a weird interplay between that where you might be able to score one like 1.5 seconds after your amplification ends and still get it counted. But I think the 3 seconds is just like in case there's a jam or something.
And the other thing, I think it was Aiden who said, if let's say you were dedicated to just amping things up, and you know within those 10 seconds window, if you can grab a game piece and bring it near the amp, so that when that window closes, then you know that way you have the game piece right there. All you're doing is turning it around, and then picking them up. And it's things that you can only carry one game piece in this game. Like just that was the one thing I said. I'm like, oh, I hope they made a mistake, but no, it's not a mistake. It's intentional. So, but I think you can just mine it until when it's ready for you to, dispose of it, and then that could be a better use of time than trying to score it.
I think also with that 10-second dead time, it's going to take you probably 5 seconds to go across this field and come back with a game piece if you aren't lucky with pieces being near you. In that other 5 seconds, you can defense against the other team, especially if you are just an amp bot. You can potentially make yourself heavier and make a better defense, and just kind of mess around with the other bots and then come back immediately after those 10 seconds are over.
I would say, for me, I think the biggest thing the 10 seconds is going to affect is if you have like 1.5, like one bot doing full amp, one bot doing full shooting, and then you have someone who's like rotating between, or basically more than one bot trying to score in the amp, that during that 10 seconds, that second bot can't like interact basically with it. So like in that 10 seconds, they need to be focused. You need to have at least 2 bots focusing on shooting, because that's the biggest thing I think it tells you, is that you really want to have a bot that can like switch between the 2 actions, because like if you can each get one, and then one bot is going to get the next one, they'll get like another one ready to go for the next amp. Well, the other bot's going to get one to shoot, and then your third bot is just been shooting the whole time. It's going to probably be a lot better, because like shooting, you can have basically everyone can be shooting at once, but only one person can be scoring the amp at once. So you can't have everyone all focusing amp ever. You always going to have someone trying to go for shooting. Even if it's not worth as much, it's just congestion-wise, you can't have 2 bots. Or like, you can have 2 bots trying to go for amp, but like 3 bots trying to go for amp, you're just going to have bots sitting around there. So realistically, 10 seconds is really only affecting that second bot that's trying to score, or that would be doing amps. So it kind of just means basically, you just have to have a bot that's flexible to really optimize the use of the amp with that 10-second penalty.
Mark, I have a different topic. So if you have something on the app, please go.
It's sort of related to what Lauren just said, and I don't want to stray too far, but does anybody think that there's going to be an issue with the bottleneck at the amp and or the speaker? They're both kind of in the same part of the field. It's the only place you can score is in those 2 places. I don't know. What are people's thoughts about that?
I think people are really, especially with Kitbot, if you have 2 Kitbots on one team, the very front section of that subwoofer is going to be, everyone is going to want to be there at once, and it's going to be very contested, and you're going to have to be very well coordinated. So being able to score from like at least all 3 sides would be beneficial, but I think that there'll be congestion, but I think that one section will be the worst of it.
You think the Kitbot can't score from the 2 sides?
It can in the video. They show where it's reliably scores, and there's about 3 positions. But they do say that, but the front face of the subwoofer is the easiest to line up with, because the other ones you don't have your bumper flat against the wall. It's you have the corner, and it's
okay. Thanks.
I had not considered this before, but I suspect the kitbot will only be able to score from the front and one of the 2 sides, because it spins the hoop, and if it's on the side that's spinning, it'll actually hit the roof and spin it out.
Oh,
because the hoop is
because they
spinning.
only have it on the one side. the
Right.
wheels.
So
Got it.
having
That makes sense.
having a shooter that spins the wheel, you won't be able to, even though it's 18 inches wide deep, and you certainly would have enough room to get up from the side and score. If it's spinning the wrong way, it'll actually hit the roof and kick out rather than kicking in. I hadn't considered that until just now.
But I think one of the kitbot. Sorry, Ian.
So would that mean that shooters that don't put backspin on the robot are going to be important, like we saw in 2022, where you're going to want to accelerate it from both sides potentially?
Well,
but it's like the physics of a spinning object is that spinning objects go straight, and floating knuckleballs don't. So I think you got to have the note I think it has to be spinning if you want it to be reliably.
And with it bouncing out, this thing's foam is so good at absorbing energy that I do think that when it hits it, the deformation will take most of that spin. It'll deform and convert most of that momentum and just keep the travel going in.
And Scott, going back to your point, I think I wish many low budget teams like ours and will be plugged into a discussion like this, because I think the point of the whole kitbot is not necessarily 100% follow this and you get an end result, but hey, this is an idea and you can you can tweak it around until you make it work. And part of that, you having a design layout instructional plan, it saves you the time of coming up with an original brand new idea. So, and maybe after you work it out, that's something you can tweak. Maybe you want to use a less compliant wheel, or how much of a diameter of what kind of wheels you use. These are all different things that those teams. At least I know I will have my kids doing this week is test all these different wheels, which one give you a better spin or better distance, because then that way you have something to go with than just scratching your head there and not knowing really. But I don't think it was meant to be necessarily follow this and be
We're almost running out of time here, but I want to make sure I get my new topic / question in. How many people are thinking of building a robot that can drive under the stage?
We are thinking about doing that, of making a robot that can go under the stage.
We've already kind of picked out like a design for our systems, and it can fit under it. Although it wasn't like our top priority, the design we came out with, we went, oh wait, if we just do this, it fits under. So yeah, we're going to be able to fit under.
I think it's going to be a design requirement for robots that want to place game pieces into the trap to fit under the stage, or at least fit a majority of the robot under the stage, because to lean in on that trap and brace up against that trap, you have to have a majority of your weight to the inside of the chain. And that means to do that, you have to be able to fit a majority of your robot under the chain before you can start climbing. And so that's going to be I think, interesting trade-off for robots that want to do the trap, of almost being forced to having every mechanism but their climber be able to fit under that. And then at that point, you might as well kind of just go for a completely short robot. And I think that that's going to be something that a lot of teams who want to go for the trap aren't going to realize is a side effect of going for it.
I think that, like, other than going for the trap, going under the stage may not save, like, it'll save some time, but I don't know how much time it will save and how difficult it may be to design around the low height requirements that you would need to fit under the chain. Because if you do at any point have something that's above the chain, it could be really easy for something to break off by getting caught in it.
With the robot architectures I was like sketching out, it was almost hard not to fit under the chain. That's for robots that work with our goals, but like there were solid 6-8 inches of clearance on everything I thought of.
I think going under the stage is going to have the same importance as going over the charge station. Is that most people will be willing / can do it, but it will be just be like, if you're picking an alliance, it'll be like, what's the difference between these two? They're by the numbers, they're the same. Oh, this one can go under. Okay, that'll be less traffic jams when it's super busy. So.
If no one else has anything else to add, I have a question that's quite off topic from this.
Go ahead.
What field elements are you building, and how are you building them? From like a storage perspective, are you parts going to be disassembled, and basically anything you're considering on them?
This year's, I think, brutal for field elements in particular because there's 2 very large objects at the least, especially for teams trying to do everything. I know that we still haven't decided which things we want to do yet, but we want to have our field elements as fast as possible for prototyping because we're just running an insanely aggressive schedule this year of having our robot done within the first 3 weeks, which is also what we ran last year and seemed to work out pretty well. But that means that a lot of our field element building has been outsourced to people who have spare time on their hands at home and being willing to. And we've kind of divided the work among various parents and students who want to. So, for example, I worked on the trap in my house today instead of doing my homework. And now I have homework to do. And one of our students, his dad has like a full workshop in his garage, and that means that we're lucky enough that he'll be able to build the speaker for us, and that's going to hopefully be a huge time save once we start actually prototyping.
Yeah, the biggest problem I see is with the speaker is the height. Getting it like through a doorway easily. Well, because it's so tall, right? It's taller than a lot of doorways that are like 6'8", I think. And yeah, you can have the front of it come off, but now you got to like tip the thing, and it's just storage of that. I think is going to be a real pain.
I think it might be something that have to be built in sections and then be assembled because, most schools' doors aren't that wide enough. Actually, most classroom school, service doors are 3 feet, maximum, and so, yeah.
But I have another question if you guys are done with the game element stuff.
I do say I feel like about the getting the speaker, just a PVC little that, and then just duct tape up to a wall might just be the lowest effort strategy.
So I think we have time for someone have one more topic. I think we have time for one more topic, and I think we better wrap it up.
I had a question, but it skipped me. So if somebody else does, then
I kind of have. Do we think that the trap can be used as a support to stop from kind of like tipping while you're climbing the chain?
I think that the trap is going to be. I think, well, a lot of designs to play game pieces in the trap are going to inherently race against the trap because you need to open it up, but also, to kind of prevent that tipping. I think we're going to see a lot of teams that purposefully almost tip into that wall, because when I made it today, and I didn't realize this until I did, there's a lot of wall just below the trap and a lot of room for robots to race against that wall, and that may make the trap a bit easier of a challenge to do.
speaking of that end game, my question was the chain. Did anyone think that using an ending mark, climber in the box, the hook, what's the chances of that sliding down if you were to, let's say, two robots were to be going at the same chain, because the more robot on a chain, that's harmonizing, and so would it, would it, what's the chance of that sliding off, or do you want to create something that would just latch or hook onto, hook into the link, or what?
My idea on going about that might be something like that can grip onto it, almost like a hand grabbing onto it with rubber, so you don't slide, and then another robot could easily go to the other side and get on there. Because I think, yeah, just a normal hook might slide depending on how big it is. Because if the hook is a tighter loop, then it might get caught on one of the chains going in, like one or the other way, because of the way that they're linked. You might get caught on there. But with a bigger hook, you might just glaze over it. So it might depend on your hook size.
I think you're going to want to climb. If you're climbing with a friend, I think you're going to want to get up there and get lined up together and then climb together, like what happened in 2020, or on the pole that would swing. I think you're going to want to both get up there and both climb at the same time. So I think sliding down the chain is not going to be as important. I think the bigger issue is that because it's a chain and not a pole, that when your hooks reach on, I think there's going to be a lot of lateral force trying to bring if you have two hooks, I think it's going to be bringing your hooks together, and your arms could bend or they could get tweaked somehow. So I think my bigger concern with two hooks grabbing onto a chain is that how do I stop them from like coming together and torquing something in the frame of my robot? How do I avoid some of that lateral force?
An interesting thing Team Rembrandt's posted on Open Alliance is they designed these hooks that had like these teeth in the middle of them that would dig into the specific chain link, which would basically force their hooks to stay on the same chain that they grabbed onto, which might be useful, but then you still have different forces to worry about.
Because one of my kids actually used the ending mark hook yesterday to actually modify and do just that, and so, we haven't built a robot yet, but just hanging on, putting in one of those links, it held on, but you don't notice, like Scott said, you don't know what all the forces are until you actually it's in play, or you build something that actually testing the actual forces that of nature. So
You may want your winches that pull your arms down to be independent of each other, so that you can pull and get one hooked on and then continue to pull the other one down until it engages the chain, and then pull them both up. So you kind of have one arm is higher than the other, and then that won't do that force of pulling in towards each other.
Super smart. Yeah, that's a great tip. All right, I think we better call it a day. I don't know if anyone signed up for next week's call yet. Oh yes, I know somebody has. I don't remember what the topic was, but I'm almost certain someone is on next week's call. I promised that we would put something in the chat about how to get on the form. And did somebody do that? We post a link to the meeting. I'm going to post in the chat right now how to find information out about the roundtable. Let me go look that up quick. Here we go. All right, so it's 2052.com/roundtable. So we put a page on our website, and now you can get to all the things. You can get to the YouTube watch list for all of our previous calls. You can sign up to host a topic. You can add the recurring meeting to your calendar, and you can get on the mailing list. So all in one spot now, 2052.com/roundtable, and you can get signed up to make sure that you never miss another meeting. And then I don't remember. Oh, I have a link right here. I can see what next week's topic is. Next week's topic is going to be Lauren. Lauren's talking about strategic design. Okay, good. Thank you, Lauren. So next week we'll have Lauren's topic, and then if we don't have anything for January 21st, by the way, all you new folks, anybody can host a topic. There's a link on that webpage. You can go there and you can sign up to host a topic. If nobody puts a topic on the list for January 21st, maybe we'll come back and we'll review how our prototyping went, how our build's going, how many autos you've already got written, all of that. Or if somebody decides, yes, I absolutely want to do that, then go sign up, host that conversation, and earmark the 21st for that topic if that's what you want to do. But Ian, awesome job. Thank you for hosting this topic. I really appreciate you getting this on the list early so that we had it earmarked. And great job kind of guiding the conversation tonight. All right. Thanks, everyone. Hopefully I'll see everybody next week.
That's it for this week's FRC Roundtable. Join us live all season long, every Sunday night. Visit the website at team2052.com/roundtable to sign up for weekly invites. In the meantime, keep building, keep learning, and we'll see you next week.